The following episode was originally exclusive to our Patreon members. If you'd like to help support the show and get exclusive content, please consider going to patreon.com/Requiem Podcast. This episode was originally supposed to have contributions from a member of the band, but due to unforeseen circumstances, that was no longer able to happen. So anytime you hear us mentioning that you might hear something from a member of the band, disregard that. That is no longer the case. So please enjoy the episode. You just heard Cries of the Forsaken from Screams of Anguish from the 1993 album by Brutality. This is a Patreon journey into Florida death metal. Yeah. I'm Mark.
And I'm Jason. And you guys already know that because you're Patreons. So, but we probably will release this for the general public down the road. But for right now, this is a Patreon exclusive into a band that Mark and I have talked a lot about doing for years, like a full decade.
Yeah.
Well, you were living here, and I remember like we were both kind of just checking those records out. And we're like, hey, man, have you listened to Screams of Anguish lately? That's a pretty fucking killer record. You know, I was like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they came out, I always liked them, but it was never like, oh, man, just Brutality. Dude.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of the things we'll definitely talk about this episode is just like, the timing of the band and a few other things like that. But, what you got in Cries of the Forsaken is for people, maybe there's some patrons that don't know this band very well, but, I mean, that sequence from about like 3 minutes, 2:55 to 4:15 in the song where you kind of go from this like mid-pace, like obituary asphyx crushing riff into a frenzy of like Trey, Morbid Angel solos to this like full Luke LeMay, like tech death kind of thing into a melodic James Murphy, Chuck Schuldiner solo. That's pretty much Brutality in a nutshell. Like that, You could take that 1 minute sequence from Cries of the Forsaken and be like, this is the whole band, like right here. You want fucking Obituary, you want Morbid Angel, you want Death, you want James Murphy, you want
some Cannibal Corpse blasts.
Yeah, there's definitely some corpse blasts, the whole thing. But, I mean, you could be fooled too after thinking like, you hear that opening of Cries of the Forsaken, it's very melodic, kind of almost speed metal-ish for like the first like 35 seconds. And then that fucking staccato kind of tremola chromatic kind of thing starts to sort of come in. And almost like in a weird way, I don't know if you picked up on this, but there's some things that Brutality does throughout, like a lot of Screams of Anguish, a little bit on When the Sky Turns Black, but it reminds me of like Dark Tranquillity of the Gallery a little bit. It has some of that kind of like
I didn't even think of
weird nature. Now it's not as melodic, but just in terms of like the way that the guitars are like attacking you, but in like a melodically creative way.
Yeah.
I mean, they have some crushing parts, but they're like, there's a delicateness to like what like the guitar players are doing, based on some of their background and stuff.
I even put that, this is what I think I remember Control Denied sound like parts of it. Like the more thrashy.
Yeah, you could see that.
Masturbatory bits,
Yeah.
They're a
little bit more angular and techy in a certain sense. I always want to like Control Denied more than I end up doing. And there are parts of them I really do like, but there's also parts like I just wish Chuck sang on it. Because it would be like, fuck, I'd be really like way into this,
Yeah.
But like, 3.5 minutes later into the song, like when the song's kind of coming to a conclusion, like all of a sudden these two incredible solos from Jay Fernandez and Don Gates just fucking melt your face. And I can't remember. I can't count
kind of most songs.
The amount of times I wrote this fucking solo just melted your face. Like it just fucking melts you.
Well, I think that's what in some of the interviews that I was listening to or reading, they never really like to be describe themselves as a tech band at all, which is kind of funny.
I get that,
but they want to like, oh, this is fucking cool. I want to melt your face. Like I think that's where they're coming from. Like this is just like, this is what they're into.
They kind of like maybe sit closer to like maybe what Nocturnus was sort of like doing sometimes, but Nocturnus had like the sci-fi thing going on, but like,
if you took the sci-fi thing away from Nocturnus, you wouldn't really have much there. I don't think,
but they did like crazy fucking like melt your face solos over top
the
things.
twin guitar players those guys were just
I'm saying maybe
incredible.
The guitar level, not the drums and the rest of the music, but
or vocals,
that same approach. Poor Mike.
I like the key.
What's that? We did Nocturnus. We enjoy them, But so that's who we're gonna kind of be looking at today, and it's gonna be a pretty relaxed kind of episode, as a lot of our Patreon episodes are. So if you're a new patron and you haven't really kind of checked these things out, cool. If this is now released to the general public, then cool as well. Sign up and become a Patreon. All that good stuff. But one of the things we like to do for, people that are kind of new to this is just got to check in and get some pleasantries. So we like to be a little bit more laid back. There's not going to be a ton of history in this Brutality episode. We were supposed to have interviewed Jay Fernandez yesterday, but a family emergency kind of happened for him, so we're rescheduling that. But it'll be so we don't know what he's going to say to the questions we have yet, but I'm hoping it's going to be fucking
Hopefully
awesome.
It's not no.
Yeah. So I hope it's going to be pretty cool. So scattered throughout this episode, you will be hearing from Jay talking about sort of various things throughout his experiences and stuff. And we'll introduce all the band members in a moment. But yeah, Mark, how you been? What have you been up to these days?
I was just near Tampa, actually.
Yeah, you were exploring Orlando.
Yes, went down for my girlfriend's brother's 40th birthday and went to Animal Kingdom.
Yeah.
Got to ride the Avatar ride.
Okay.
Which I forgot we saw that when it came out, and I've never thought about it since.
Yeah.
So this thing was
one of the weirdestly forgettable big movies ever made.
That, like, for some people it changed their life and they wanted to live inside the movie.
Yeah.
And I was just like, okay. Unobtainium.
Very much like a had to be there kind of moment.
Yeah, and seeing this thing, I was like, oh God, I remember how corny everything was.
Yeah.
The ride
cool.
was cool. It was like one of these things where you put on, they like clamp you on this little chair that's, I don't remember what the things were called, but they're like the pterodactyl things they were flying around in.
Yeah.
And you put on those kind of like IMAX glasses, and then you get all these drops, and they actually have, like, as you come close to water, they have like a little bit of mist.
You missed it.
It was a pretty, I haven't been to any kind of theme park in years. So like what it's become is kind of nuts. Mm-hmm. But you wait in line for, 45 minutes. They try to make it interesting when you sit in line now. So you can, like, all these like little kind of like movie set things you're looking at, but it was fine. But then got to see the Galaxy's Edge, Star Wars. It was fine.
How was Blue Milk?
I didn't try it.
What?
It looked disgusting.
I fucking want to try Blue Milk.
I saw a guy and his son got some, and the kid, he was like, and I was like, I don't want to try this.
I like strawberry milk, so I'm like game for it.
I don't think it's even milk. I think it's basically like it looked like a Slurpee that's not frozen.
Okay.
So you can get those. You could get the mouse droid. Remember from the first one that looked like a little toaster on wheels? You get that full of popcorn. That was probably the neatest thing that was there, except for a little Salacious Crumb puppet. Mm-hmm. There was no original series shit there.
Yeah, that's what you're saying.
That really weirded me out. There wasn't a Darth Vader. There was only R2 unit was like one that was in this little like diorama off to the side, full of like busted up droids.
I mean, they had the Millennium Falcon.
Yeah, it was just all stuff from the new series. They even had like one of the main, like the Rise of the Resistance, I think is the name of the ride. It's a pretty incredible ride, but it's all Kylo Ren and the shrill red-haired screamy guy. They had yet a different Calamarian dude except for Akbar, like piloting this animatronic guy, piloting the ship within it, which was cool. And
yeah,
they dump you into the main hangar bay, and there's like, I don't know, probably 50 First Order Stormtrooper guys there. It's like, this thing I would just been so much more in awe if it was like all the old shit. And it seems like a missed opportunity spending $4 billion and not having anything there.
Are we just out of the age range now? I mean,
it was
Jedi was 83. Do they just kind of think like marketing to like our age group and older is just not like, whereas you hit people who grew up with like the middle trilogy and then the last trilogy is
they
like
didn't have anything from the prequel trilogy at all.
So they're just doubling down on the youth market is what they're hoping for.
Yeah, but everybody that was there was like old people
that were disappointed that there wasn't like
everybody seemed fine. I think they're just oblivious to it, but like it was cool to see like an entire environment where even like the bathrooms and like you go into the urinals and they're like don't look like regular urinals. Everything looks like the fire hydrant looks like something that would be the only thing that throws you out of the whole experience is like the exit signs and all the fire code shit you have to have there.
Yeah.
But even like when you're walking to get into that, all those little bars, the queue that hold you in the queue, all look like power cables that are slung. Like the attention to detail is pretty incredible. But
is it like Westworldy at all? Like it's
not that immersive.
It's not like cool and that
because all the Imperial people are all fat teenagers with pimples, Yeah. And
hello,
there's a couple basically. And there's a couple things where there's like part of the ride you're basically being interrogated
and thrown in some kind of brig type thing.
Yeah.
And they didn't get the best actors to do that. It was just kind of, whatever. It wasn't that. I mean, it was more of a production feat.
Yeah.
It was pretty interesting to see all the stuff. The ride was fine. The coolest part was probably getting to pilot the Millennium Falcon in that's other Smuggler's Run thing. And just like
how do they do
walking
that?
through
Is it just like a couple people at a time? Does it just take forever?
They do, what do they do? I think you do up to 6.
Okay.
We got the pilot, and then there was gunners, and then there was navigators.
Did you get to go down into like the
You're basically
nice shot, kid, don't get cocky kind of area?
No, it's all in the main cockpit.
Okay.
So it's not completely accurate, but you do get to flip switches and do stuff. So it's similar to that Avatar ride where it's like a screen and the whole thing moves around, which is cool. But just walking through the corridor of the Millennium Falcon up the ramp
that's pretty sweet.
That was pretty cool. But
yeah. No, I definitely, I have interest, that like Harry Potter and the Simpsons
I've heard
world.
the California one's better.
Oh, okay. Got it. Wonder if that one's good. Is that got more recent or old stuff?
I'm not sure. Maybe not.
Yeah.
But it's not as big. And it's not in Florida.
Yeah, I was when you were in Florida. I think all I did exciting was curling, which is always fun.
Were you Canadian?
I'm pretty good at curling, actually. It's like kind of a.
Do you like the sweeping, or you like the crouching and letting the?
I'm a better
slide?
curler. I mean, I'm an okay sweeper, but like, yeah, I don't know. But I feel like my trajectory is I had a lot of really like great shots that were like accurate, and then maybe the other person on the other team would knock me out. So, but I feel like I have a pretty good hold. That's my second time doing it. But outside of that, I've just been kind of immersive into, different movies. I was just telling you about this weekend. I kind of went on I went on a pretty good tear this weekend because I had a 4-day weekend because of Easter, no Good Friday, things like that. So I watched Pig, the new Nicolas Cage movie. Is pretty dope.
Truffle guy.
Truffle, yeah. It's very much like you feel like it's gonna be like kind of John Wickish, and it's not. It kind of like goes in a completely different direction. I appreciated that.
Okay.
Because like with Nobody, like you don't need that anymore. It's already been done. So it kind of like subverts that expectation. But yeah, Nicolas Cage is fantastic in that. I saw Ghost Story. Did you ever see that?
The old movie,
No, the one that came out in like 2017.
Casey Affleck one.
Yeah,
I've heard about it.
it's really interesting.
Yeah.
They based a lot of it on like the silent ghost in Spirited Away that just kind of stands and like stares at you.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting. It deals with like grief and time, and it's
like ultra low budget.
Yeah, but it's like Carey Mulligan and or not Mulligan. No, it's the girl from Tattoo Dragon Fincher movie. She played.
Noomi Rape.
She was in the Swedish ones, but then Fincher made the American one with James Bond.
Oh,
It's that girl, Rooney Mara. That's
okay.
who it was. Yeah,
Another
girl from Social Network.
weird name.
And stuff. Yeah. It was good. I watched because I have to for my fill-in filmography. Sophie's Choice.
How's that? It was Meryl Streep, right?
Yeah. She's great. Movie subpar.
Who does she choose?
Do you want me to spoil it?
I don't give it. I'm never gonna watch that.
She chooses her son, not her daughter. Yeah, it's fucking.
Fair choice.
That's that sequence. Like Meryl Streep earns her stripes in that movie, but like the rest of the movie's fine. Tonally, it's kind of fucked up.
Who else is in that? Who's like the dude in it?
Kevin Kline. He's pretty good. It's his first movie.
Okay.
The weak spot is Peter McNichol. Remember that dude from like Ally McBeal? You would totally recognize him. He had kind of curly hair. Looked like
Kind of short guy.
yeah.
Yeah.
He's like the narrator, and it's just like
Does he have like a Richard Dreyfuss vibe?
kinda. It's
Okay.
kind of douchey.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like
He always plays like kind of a mischievous turd character.
kind of, yeah. And that's all right. But I was telling you, after Pig was over, I had taken an edible, and so like I was just kind of chilling and stuff like that. And like Kid 90 came on afterwards, which is like the Punky Brewster like kind of documentary. But another movie I saw that I think you dig, you might have even seen it, is that Ethan Hawke movie, First Reformed, where he's the priest. Have you seen that?
Is that recent or is
Yeah, in the last like 4 or 5 years. It was recommended on one of the podcasts I listened to, a film one. He's fucking really cool. He's kind of like a radical type Catholic priest.
I don't know if I've seen that. It sounds familiar though.
You would probably remember if you saw it. It feels like a movie they'd make in the 70s.
Okay.
It's good, so Ethan's good in that. I recently watched The Devils, which I know you're a big fan of. That was speaking of Easter movies, that was a great movie. Ken Russell, pretty blasphemous shit. Saw the Batman in theaters. I like that a lot.
Nice. I've heard lots of I haven't heard a whole lot of down the middle. I've heard either this is the worst thing ever or this is the best thing ever.
It'd be weird to think. I don't know. I guess if you wanted it to just be like a bang pow comic movie, you might be disappointed, but
yeah,
it's like a Fincher noirish movie. It feels more like Seven.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen
grimy
trailers and stuff.
It's film noir, detective.
How do you feel about Pattinson as
I'm fine with
Batman?
Him.
Does he do any stupid voice modulation?
Not that I remember.
Fear me.
He does say his like one of his opening lines is like, I didn't love it, but that was the only weak spot. I'm trying to remember what he says,
but he doesn't try to talk all
instead
affected.
of saying like I'm Batman, he's like I'm fear.
I'm vengeance.
Vengeance. That's what it is. I'm vengeance. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But the rest of it's good.
There's a fine. I think the person
Jeffrey Wright's great.
The done it the best is
Paul Dano's great. He's
a complete weirdo, so that
incredible.
makes sense.
He's basically a QAnon, like fucking Riddler type character.
I think Kevin Conroy's done the two sides the best from the animated series.
Yeah, he's got that.
Where it's like not too affected voice.
Yeah.
Keaton wasn't bad either, but
what's interesting about Pattinson in the movie is like when he's Bruce Wayne, he's not suave, and I appreciate that because like.
Well, he's kind of just a mess, isn't he?
He's a fucking mess. And anybody that dresses up like a bat, you're a fucking mess.
Yeah.
You're a fucking lunatic.
So did they...
And they kind of lean into that a little.
Do they lean into the whole, like, he's really Batman and Bruce Wayne's the facade, or...
That's interesting. I'd have to think on that one. I don't want to weigh in one way or the other. I need to see it again.
That's the kind of the animated series approach.
Yeah. It's kind of
it was the kind of the Christian Bale approach, too.
Yeah, in a sense. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like that famous speech in Kill Bill, right? Mm-hmm. About Superman. Superman, like, his costume is Clark Kent. It's not Superman, kind of thing. So,
totally.
Yeah, so Saul, speaking of kind of like interesting noirish kind of revenge movies, did you see that Joaquin Phoenix movie a couple years back? You Were Never Really Here?
Yeah.
I
dug it.
Pretty intense.
I don't remember much about it, but
he's like hunting down, like, he rescues like girls that have been like fucking kidnapped in the sex trade and shit.
He's just like going in with like a hammer and shit.
Yeah, he's just fucking brutal. Yeah.
Who directed? It was a female director that she did something else pretty interesting recently.
Did she? Okay.
Yeah, that was probably 4 years ago.
Yeah. I watched that up when I visit my folks the weekend before Easter or whatever. But so I've been kind of dabbling in that. But my big obsession the last week or so is I finally took the dive and got the free Showtime and kicked in Yellow Jackets.
What do you think?
So I love it. I'm fucking obsessed with it. I thought it started incredible. Have you seen the whole thing, right?
Yeah, I've seen the whole series.
I thought it was really, really incredible first 2 episodes. Mm-hmm. Then there's like, I don't think if you go back and watch them, it's a total dip in quality, but I feel like it sags a little in the mid-season, and then it really picks up steam like the last 3 episodes.
I think they have the same problem Lost does, is where they rely too much on flashbacks, and you don't need as much back and forth, I don't think.
Yeah, I think what they're doing, and I don't want to spoil it for anybody who hasn't seen it, but I'll talk kind of in code.
There's a second season coming up, isn't
there?
there?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
When they pitched it, they basically said they have like kind of like a 4 or 5 season arc story that they can tell.
Okay.
And I think really like the last episode is like the start of the craziness. I think like season 2 is going to be like the real Yellow Jackets. I think this was almost like a prequel season.
Well, you don't know exactly what happened, yeah.
And now you kind of like, now the insanity can begin, and now they can start playing like the cult stuff like in the present time. And I think what they'll do is they'll probably do like the backstory of some of the other characters that weren't in the first season.
Yeah.
And I think what's really interesting, without getting too, crazy about it, because I listen to a shitload of podcasts on this, so I'm like totally fucking like in it now. But it's almost like, I feel like maybe the main characters we're following are maybe the villains. And I think that's like kind of fascinating.
I don't think so. I mean, because I
feel like it's an unreliable narrator. Like we maybe think that like they're the heroes because they're almost presented to us, but they might be outside of maybe the Juliette Lewis character, who I think is kind of,
she's great in that.
I think she's like the moral force, which is why she's the most messed up.
She seems the most,
Like everybody else is like fucking like
that
psychopathically.
New Zealand actress too. What do you know?
Melanie
her name?
Linsky.
She's great in everything I ever see her in. She was in a bunch of like Duplass Brothers.
She was,
stuff.
you know, where she like got her big start, right?
She's in that Peter Jackson movie.
Yeah, Heavenly Creatures with Kate Winslet.
Yeah,
that true story where they fucking kill their parents.
Yeah,
again, they're like perfect for, you know. They really brought in like cool child actors from the 90s.
They did. I mean, I hadn't seen anything that Juliette Lewis has done in years. I thought she was great in this.
She kind of came out of rehab, so she's almost playing herself, and I think that was like hard for her.
It makes
a little, sense. You know. But the real like all-star is fucking Christina Ricci. She's like next level. That's like she was like born for that.
She's
part.
going against against type and everything.
She's very, very fun. So yeah, if you haven't seen Yellow Jackets, it's worth the free Showtime. And then
because I watched my dad was watching the new Dexter or the Dexter thing. So once that was over, I was like, what the fuck else is on Showtime? And I started watching that one night and watched like 4 episodes in a row.
I'm pretty obsessed with it. You know, like I said, the Doom's coming, like Pagan, like Homecoming. Yeah, like I'm on board for that shit.
It seems like a more interesting loss, to be honest.
Yeah, and
as far as the mystery, what humans go through, and
I think like one of the criticisms of the show, without again, I'm trying to speak in code because I don't want to ruin it for people, but
I think it should be a finite, shorter series, but
it probably could be. But again, 10 episodes is not like Lost had trouble that it was doing like 22 episodes for multiple seasons. So I think it,
and they didn't have,
and I think they have an end game too. Yeah. So I think the creators like Melanie Linsky wouldn't sign on unless she knew how the story ended.
That's good
because she wants her character to like arc that direction, and so she's the only one that was like in her like contract guarantee. So I think like her confidence in it makes me feel confident that like they know
she's always done interesting stuff. So she's never like done like just some dumb mainstream paycheck movie. Yeah.
But yeah, there's some cool stuff. We can talk more about it. And then obviously I've been kind of, going through my comics journey, my X-Men journey still. I've made it to the Jim Lee era. Claremont's almost on his way out. So I'm almost to X-Men #1. I'm to basically X-Force #1, like the end of the New Mutants run. Waltz Portatio has just shown up on X Factor.
Okay.
And I've been kind of really into Excalibur stuff. I don't think I talked about this on the podcast, but I discovered a podcast through this Twitter page. If you're a hardcore X-Men fan, it's called the Claremont Run. Follow it. It's like a scholarly professor who's like the world certified like Chris Claremont kind of dude. He's the guy that wrote basically wrote Uncanny X-Men for like 15 years. That's pretty unprecedented. Outside of like somebody that...
Well, since the 70s to the 90s, right? Almost 20 years, I think.
Yeah. But like, can you think of another like...
Larry Hama. G.I. Joe.
Was it 15 years?
He did 155 issues.
Okay. Yeah, so Claremont went from like issue...
And he did the Nom, but... Yeah. But not as far as like one consistent.
They're actually just talking about Larry Hama in this podcast on Excalibur called Oh Gosh, Oh Golly, Oh Wow, because Larry Hama wrote an Excalibur issue and he did a crossover with the Nth Man right before it got canceled.
That.
Yeah, he canceled.
I bought like that whole series.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
So I was a big Larry Hama fan from G.I. Joe.
So you'd be interested in this Excalibur because they basically cross universes over. They like time travel to each other's universes.
I don't remember anything about that guy except he had white hair and no shirt and no shoes.
Yeah, it's weird. Yeah, but I've been kind of talking to the creators of that Excalibur podcast, and they might have me on down the road as like a kind of a guest of some sort. So that's pretty cool. So
yeah, sure.
And then that's pretty much just like I said, being immersed in podcast world and Yellow Jackets and movies and just fucking school shit, So
yeah, I got a Corsican Ram mount taxidermy while I was in Chicago. So that's
are you allowed
the first big piece?
Speaking of comics, are you allowed to talk about anything yet?
No.
Okay.
The contract is in the lawyer's hands right now, and as soon as I sign it, I need to figure out what I can talk about.
Okay. Yeah, I will.
So I should have 2 books I can announce in the next couple months.
Pretty sweet. Yeah. It all sounds good. So, but here we are. Fucking Florida Death.
Back to Brutality.
Yeah. This is probably going to be, like I said, I don't know how long we're going to get with Jay. Some of the interviews I've done, when I reached out to John from Discordance Axis, I did not expect it to be like 2 hours, The one you did with Dan, we just did an Edge of Sanity episode that ended up being pretty solid. So I'm hoping like we get some good stuff out of Jay that will kind of help fill in the history, because this is a band that doesn't have a lot of scholarship, really. I searched around. I don't know if you found many online interviews. I didn't really look too hard.
I was looking on YouTube actually, mostly because I'm better listening to shit and then documenting it that way, or seeing what I can find and get a general idea, then go dig a little bit deeper. But I found a couple interviews with Jay. I found
probably Jeff Akers. He's kind of the original dude.
Yeah, the bass player singer.
Yep.
A lot of those like terrible, like 8-minute long YouTube things where somebody that obviously doesn't know anything about the band and talks to the whole band like, so like you guys are like 30 years, like been around forever. Like, how's that feel? Like, okay.
Oh, God. Yeah.
But honestly, I didn't find a ton.
Yeah.
So.
What was when you guys were doing Eclipse, or not Eclipse, but Requiem, what was the vibe when like Screams of Anguish and When the Sky Turns Black kind of came out? Like, were those records that registered much, being like that they were on Nuclear Blast? I mean, you guys were paying attention at that point, or
it was kind of like,
were you guys kind of on your way into Europe by that point pretty firm?
Oh yeah. But I mean, I think I gave the name initially just kind of, I was like, okay,
seemed kind of like
it made me
predictable. Maybe.
Yeah, it seemed like a little too cavemanish, and this is what like, so I just kind of judged it by that. The logo's kind of goofy.
Yeah,
it's got like a dragon in it and stuff.
Yeah,
the covers are kind of weird. And but I gave it I got it. It's from Nuclear Blast, and I believe I got the promo for it. I might have reviewed it in one of the Requiems. I'm not sure. But I was just like, I mean, it's a great death metal record.
Yeah,
but it's not one of those like transcending great death metal records. But in retrospect, it's just like, Jesus, there's so much good, like them and Malevolent and Monstrosity, that always get kind of like, that second Tampa run that just kind of get overwhelmed by how much the first run got so much attention.
Yeah, it's aged well,
Yeah. But then you hold this up against like, okay, you already had the first wave of, Tampa American stuff and, Rochester metal and death metal, and then we get Sweden. So this is like, okay, we've already heard this, but there's like these incremental. It was totally different vibe back then.
I feel like they fit in the way that like some of those like second, third wave, Swedish death metal bands, or like those Finnish bands that like kind of got maybe not appreciated at the time.
Yeah.
But when you go back, you're like, oh shit, these guys, like really had it together in an interesting way. And the timing of when these records came out is also kind of rough too.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, Exodus coming out way after everybody else and missing the
Misfits,
boat in a lot of ways.
We talked about some of that kind of stuff when we did that. But so I'm gonna hopefully, Jeff's gonna fill in, or excuse me, Jay's gonna fill in a lot of the kind of color to some of this story. But I did some kind of basic research just to sort of like kind of tell the story. Brutality basically started as Abomination from the Tampa area around 1986. Larry Sapp on vocals and guitar, Jeff Akers on bass, and he'll be the kind of one kind of consistent member of the band. And then a guy named Donnie Jansen on drums. They recorded demo in 87 and then changed their name to Brutality. They had actually flirted with the name, I guess, Darkness for briefly, but then they kind of settled on Brutality. They released 2 demos in 88, but then that's kind of when the lineup starts to coalesce, when Jim Coker joins on drums. And I would say, we just got done doing that Edge of Sanity episode, and I think like one of the secret weapons of Edge of Sanity was Benny Larson, and I think Jim Coker's like drums, like we're gonna talk a lot about the guitars, but like he's fucking pretty solid drummer. He's doing some things that are.
He never keeps a standard beat for more than a measure before there's like a fill or go right to a blast, and he's got that like Mike Smith from Suffocation. Right?
Yep.
He's got that kind of like power mixed with never remember his name, from Cannibal, the drummer Cannibal.
Yeah, Paul
Mazurowicz.
Yeah. Some Polish.
Paul Masvidal. I was like, no, it's cynic.
His name does come up. I do hear some Paul Masvidal in some of the guitar playing.
Same area, so.
Yep.
They might have all been playing in that same I was watching this documentary on YouTube, loosely, like this assemblage of interviews from that era, and they go to basically a self-storage place where like Obituary, Death, Morbid Angel, everybody played. They each had their own locker they would play in.
And the self-storage place was never like angry about the noise that they were creating?
I think it was mostly all bands playing there.
That's interesting.
So they could probably get more out of the bands because they would have to be in spots that had power.
Yeah.
So they could actually plug in. Plus, it's fucking Tampa. It's hot as balls. There's no air conditioning.
It's true.
So
Might as well play outside.
yeah, I mean it might have been like I don't know, they just figured out, oh the shit, this is a way we can, get some more money in here if there's a bunch of bands that
it's almost like the youth centers in Sweden or something like that.
Yeah.
It was like the equivalent, just playing in like these fucking
and then, these guys
containers.
are hearing each other play, so it's like
yeah.
everybody's like, oh shit, we gotta like up our game, or like, look at what that did. Let's try this.
Yeah, but Coker, he's gonna be there from 89 to 2014. So he's pretty consistent. I didn't realize he wasn't on the more recent stuff. Unfortunately, there's a new guy.
Yeah.
And now he's drumming with Nasty Savage. So that's pretty cool. They're another Florida, more thrash.
They're one of those bands that really never made it.
No, but like I've gone back because
locally they were huge.
Wagner did an episode on Radical Research on them, and I picked up some of those early stuff. It's fucking awesome. Really cool.
Who's putting those records out? Were they self-financed or?
Nah, I'd have to go up and look.
Some like small time thing.
Yeah, it might. One of them might have been a Metal Blade. The first one.
Okay.
Yeah, it might have been Metal Blade.
I just never saw that stuff anywhere until they started talking about it with like death interviews.
Yeah, I think all the Florida bands were into Nasty Savage, right? Yeah, but the great guitar playing and drumming, some really interesting stuff. So, and then basically what happens is they're one of those bands like I mean they start like they start releasing demos in '88. They don't get a debut out till '93. I mean I think that hurts. That's one of like it's like you said, Exodus or something like that. And I mean, I think like time has kind of passed them by, and not that they don't have success, because they do, and they're definitely appreciate it. But it's like, man, if they had just been able to get Screams of Anguish out in like '91, I mean, right when like Immolation's putting out their debut and Incantation's putting out like Suffocate, like they would have been
91,
part of
92
that
would have been a big difference.
They would have really. The landscape of metal, and we'll talk about that when we do get to '93, has just changed so dramatically by late '93 there. But yeah, they put a third demo out in 1990 called Dimension Demented, and then they put out the fourth demo in 1991 called the Metamorphosis demo. All right, and that's what's important about that demo is that's where they add a second guitar player named Don Gates, and Don Gates is going to be, you just heard him on Cries of the Forsaken. He's yeah, it's pretty sweet. And actually you can get the version that kind of exists. Technically, I think Metamorphosis, from what I've read into, kind of like was recorded in 1990, but then they didn't like the recording of it. So then Wild Rags like has them re-record a version, and that's the version that's put out in 1991, that demo. Okay. So the song we're going to be hearing, Mausoleum of Infringing Evil, technically, I guess it's still the demo, but it's been like kind of re-recorded a little bit, like a year later.
Tweaked.
So, so I don't know what the difference in sound quality. Yeah, it's
three
like
three
or four songs.
That's kind of what Wild Rags was really known for, putting out like the mini CD.
Is that what it was?
Everything I don't remember black and white.
I don't remember much on Wild Rags.
Cut Rate, Behemoth and the Pagan Vastlands.
Oh, that stuff was Wild Rags. Got it.
What the fuck? You'd see them everywhere, and it was always like one of those impulse buys. Like I got $5.
It's the kind of shit you buy at like Milwaukee Metal Fest for like $10.
Yeah.
You're like, $10. All right.
Like they were a distro, and then they'd put out some of their shit, but it was always like cheap EPs and like those little mini jewel cases and stuff.
Sure. But yeah, so as we're about to kind of like get into all of this, Metal Mind, which is a really great Polish label, I'm sure some of you who are collectors of the CDs know that Metal Mind basically re-released mostly Nuclear Blast stuff, I believe. Was it almost
Nuclear
exclusively
Blast
Nuclear Blast?
I think Roadrunner stuff too.
Some Roadrunner stuff. Yeah, you're right. And they were basically limited. It was a Polish label, limited to 2,000 copies. They're all hand numbered and stuff like that. Gold CDs. They're nice. Like if you're talking like collector items, it's pretty great. And when they re-released them, they kind of released these sort of new booklets. And most of the booklets had some type of kind of narration and reflection on the band history a little bit. So I wanted to read you a little bit from the Brutality booklet. It doesn't actually tell me who writes this. Maybe it does. Let me see. Cover art, photos. Yeah, it doesn't really give credit for.
It's not at the end of the thing.
No, Don Akers. Maybe it's Don Akers, or excuse me, Jeff Akers. Because he has a little like quote on this page in the booklet that says Jeff Akers, but the rest of it doesn't like give an author of any sort. So maybe it's somebody from like Nuclear Blast, or I don't know. But it says, for some bands, it's the place of origin that determines their music, and Brutality is certainly among them. The group hails from Tampa, Florida, the capital of American death metal. Unfortunately, being overshadowed by death giants like Cannibal Corpse, Obituary, and Deicide, Brutality never managed to get their proper acclaim for their work. These exclusive re-releases of Brutality's 3 full-length albums bring back a true legend of technical death metal, unjustly omitted by the masses. Brutality was founded in September '86 by Larry Sapp, Jeff Akers, and Donnie Jansen. At first, the group went through multiple name changes, including the name Abomination, under which they released their first homemade demo in '87, until Akers finally came up with Brutality. In the spring of '87, Jansen decided to leave the band and was replaced with Jim Coker, who lasted only from July to September. So he actually is with the band briefly, quits, and then is rehired. We'll get to that. And later on with Kenny Foz Karg. In the beginning of 1988, Brutality prepared the material for their self-titled demo and recorded it in March. However, the quality was so poor that the band decided to re-record the whole thing in April with Tim Mitchell as the second guitarist. The demo contained 4 songs: Brutality, Now Mosh, World War III, and Return of the Dead. By September, Karg and Mitchell left the group, and Brutality was put on halt until February of '89. That's when Don Gates joined as the new drummer.
Guitar player.
Nope. He's the drummer briefly. Yeah, this is where it gets good. This is why I wanted to read this, because I reread it like 3 times. Like, is that a typo? Did I fuck up? And it's like, no, Don Gates as the new drummer. Soon followed by guitarist Ben Williams. Unfortunately, Gates called it quits in June, leaving Brutality without a drummer again. The band then decided to bring back Jim Coker to the fold, making him a full-time member in July. Brutality started working on the Dimension Demented demo, which was completed around December. Due to Williams' departure, all the guitars in that demo were played by Sapp, while Travis Ogletree from Skeletal Earth made a guest appearance in the song World War III, handling the backing vocals. Dimension Demented was engineered by Josh Young at Outback Studios and became the first professional recording fully showcasing Brutality's abilities. Whew. By the end of '89, Don Gates returned to the band, taking the position of the second guitarist. So apparently he's a drummer and a guitarist.
Good multi-instrumentalist.
Yep. And in early 1990, Brutality saw their first official vinyl release through Gore Records, containing 3 tracks from the Dimension Demented demo. After April, the group gathered material for another demo release, Metamorphosis. This release was re-recorded in January of '91 in the famous Mora Sound Studios, engineered by Jim Morris himself. The revised version of Metamorphosis was released in May by Wild Rags Records. The release was followed by some intense touring around Florida alongside Hell Witch, Malevolent Creation, and Obituary on November 1st. Brutality finally shared the stage with one of their greatest inspirations, Deicide. Unfortunately, a few days later, Larry Sapp quit the band due to musical differences, and then formed a new group called Astrogoth. Brutality carried on playing without Sapp, acquiring Jay Fernandez as the new guitarist and passing the vocal duties to Jeff Akers. Together, they recorded a 3-song demo in '92 called Advance. I think it's also like Advance. It might be have something to do with
an Advance cassette.
I think so, yeah.
Because Advance sounds like a pretty boring title.
Which was meant solely for the record label's interest. Okay. Yeah. After getting a number of offers, the band eventually chose Nuclear Blast as their publisher. After adjoining vocalist Scott Regal, Brutality began recording their debut LP in the winter of '92. Whew. Yeah, it's a lot of different fucking band members and stuff. And like I said, I don't think it's necessarily exciting, but it is kind of interesting that all that sort of came together. That Don Gates is like in and out, Jim Coker's in and out. So it's like it just takes them a while to get their shit together.
Jay Fernandez is in and out at a certain
point.
It's
it's a weird. Jeff Akers is the only person that's been there since like the start. He's
the only glue.
He's the Shane Embury, who wasn't even an original member of Napalm, but it is what it is. So basically around that time, after they get signed to Nuclear Blast, they put out a 7-inch called the Sadistic 7-inch in '92. And then that was after they put out like a 3-song demo called Hell on Earth. And that's the first one that has Jay Fernandez and a new vocalist, like I said, Scott Regal. So what we're going to hear, just going to hear 2 songs from their kind of demo days just to sort of warm everybody up. This first one is from the Metamorphosis. It's re-recorded in Morris Sound, so it sounds pretty awesome. You can hear, how rough the originals were if you want to. You can kind of go and find those on YouTube a bit. But the techno prowess, you know, you can already start to hear that on the Dimension Demented demos.
Yeah,
I kind of
sure.
went back and looked, you know, so either version rules. But like with this, you get this fucking killer intro, really cool atmosphere. It's got this kind of horror, eerie kind of thing happening. There's even like a weird guitar synth kind of sound kind of happening. And then, man, they're just pouring on the leprosy, spiritual healing, like death kind of stuff, you know, especially like some of the James Murphy style leads. I noticed that. You know, the same stuff he's doing on Cause of Death.
The weird, odd timed solos. And they're good at writing like a dead simple riff and then just like kind of like enhancing it with all the guitar flurries all over the place.
I think it's interesting too because like I think Akers and Coker, you know, I mentioned Coker's drumming earlier on Cries of the Forsaken, but like they're kind of like the unsung MVPs of the band because the guitars are ripping and doing all this crazy stuff. But if you don't have like a really firm kind of rhythmic foundation, none of this works. It just sounds like a mess. And yet like you can always like bob your head and fucking headbang to like what Brutality is doing.
It's the bounce, man. Jeff Akers also is he's plays with his fingers, so you get a more interesting kind of gallop than you do with just, you know, pick playing for death metal.
Sure. I mean, I think for a demo, this sounded pretty good. Yeah. This Mausoleum of Infringing Evil. Great song title, too, you know. And then, you like I said, you get Sadistic. And Sadistic, the single that comes out a year later in 92, you know, this is sort of like the showcase of the sort of new lineup. Because at this point, you've got Jay Fernandez on guitar, who you heard on Cries of the Forsaken. And they're really trying to show off their chops. There's a lot more kind of death human, atheist, kind of tech death precision that's kind of going on.
Yeah.
It's still very listenable. It's not so tech deathy that it's like kind of like cold. It's still got like kind of a warmth to it, you know? So when that first solo kicks in Sadistic about like 135, that's kind of to me when the band kind of announced themselves. That's kind of their coming out party. Regal's vocals, they kind of remind me of, you know, Tardy, but also like kind of, they remind me a lot of like Patrick Mameli, like circa Testimony of the Ancients.
There's a lot of Glenn Benton too.
Yeah, some of that as well. Yep.
And I only like, I've never really been much of a Deicide fan, but I started listening to some of the early shit recently. I was like, okay.
I need to pull those first three out. I have them.
They're good, fun. But it's like at the time when if you heard, they just sound really samey. If you're not, you know, if you didn't have really that years of listening behind you. Yeah. It was all just kind of the same, like brutal stuff. But yeah, I'm digging those like Legion and
Once Upon the Cross is
probably, I mean,
pretty fucking good.
I think the first four are pretty good from what I can gather.
Are the Hoffman brothers on that fourth one? Is that their last one?
I think it's their last one. I don't, the stuff I heard when like what's his nuts came in from Cannibal Corpse.
I actually like
Jack
one of those
Owen.
records. The Serpents of the Unlight, I think, or some Serpents. I can't remember. It's pretty good.
Serpents of Light, I think, still has the Hoffman brothers on. Doesn't
that
it?
might be the last one. Yeah,
Okay.
there's one that came out like around 2005. That's actually pretty fucking awesome.
I don't know if I've listened to much of that.
It's a little more interesting than like what I would have expected, but
Yeah.
still pretty evil, you know. Yeah, Deicide's a band like I see them brought up a lot, and I have Deicide, but I never was a big Deicide guy.
I think they're playing. Are they playing Legion at MDF this year?
Yeah, I'm excited.
That'll be cool. I haven't seen Deicide since the 90s.
And I was always scared to go to Deicide shows because I just heard about how violent they were at Harpo's and stuff.
Yeah, everything was violent at Harpo's though. So,
but especially Deicide, I heard was like the worst of the worst. It just brought out like the most like fucked up people sometimes.
Yeah. So was it Deicide, Vader, and Death? In 90, Individual Thought Patterns, and then Vader's
Ultimate Incantation.
I'm not sure what Deicide album it was.
That would have been like Legion.
Yeah, I didn't really mean
because Once Upon the Cross was like 94, 95.
Yeah.
So I love that cover. Speaking of Easter, great cover. Yeah, so
it's nice.
But yeah, there's a lot of, you know, like there's a lot of what's interesting. You'll hear it in the Sadistic song. It's like a lot of like cool, like brighter kind of sounding notes, and that's I think what made them stand out a little bit. And it reminded me of like Human and Individual Thought Patterns and some of that.
They've got those more major, like triumphant sounding, you know, uplifting chords.
And maybe that's where I mentioned the Gallery. You know, that could be like that was all like bright major chords is what made that album sort of stand out for Dark Tranquility.
But there's a lot of like I'm hearing like some Teutonic and Sadistic, like some Teutonic thrash, some Immolation. There's a almost exactly Suffer the Children riff in there too.
Yeah.
Which
I wrote, you can tell they fit on Nuclear Blast. They
Yeah.
just like sound like the essential like 1992, 93 Nuclear Blast kind of
I mean,
band.
it's almost like they're similar like what like Gorefest did.
Yeah.
Like they were really good at what they did, but not like so different that they stood out and they're still around. You know, it's
Sure.
well, I guess they are still around, but like
Yeah.
not enough to like become the next thing.
Sure. But like they're kind of standard, and I think like in a good way, they're like there's a certain expectation you have with a band like Brutality, and they fit those expectations, and I think like 20, 30 years later, like it's kind of what you want.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you
Yeah.
didn't appreciate it at the time, but you're like, I don't get enough of this kind of stuff anymore, and the fact that like this exists like makes me happy.
I think, yeah, because I was just inundated with everything sounded like, death metal, like loud guttural vocals, blast beats. You could never hear the guitars at shows. So everything just sounded the same.
Yeah.
It was like, oh God, another fucking band that sounds like this. So it was like when, Deceased or something came out, you're like, thank fuck. Like,
Well, I think that was like, it was hard because when I was started going to Milwaukee Metal Fest and stuff, you would see a lot of those like kind of American death metal bands, and it was just very like a blur. Mm-hmm. There was just nothing to like. I didn't have the patience to pick out what was going on live, and so I didn't really like pursue a lot of the records because live I wasn't really impressed with them. Mm-hmm. But I think in hindsight, like I probably should have spent more time with bands.
I'm just glad I can go back and like appreciate like Immolation more now and like oh fuck, these guys are way better than I ever thought.
Incantation, yeah, absolutely, yep. So it's fun. So let's get into it. We've got the two kind of demo songs, and then we're gonna kind of come back and really sort of set up Screams of Anguish. You'll probably hear from Jay here as well. We don't know what he's gonna say, but I'm sure it will be insightful, and we're very glad that we were able to get Jay for this. So we got Mausoleum of Infringing Evil from Metamorphosis. And then from the Sadistic album, the Sadistic single. And I forgot to mention the Sadistic single you can find on the Metal Mind re-release of Screams of Anguish. It's it's the bonus track on there. So
wasn't there 2 tracks on it though?
Yeah, but the Sadistic song is the bonus track. So I don't know what the I don't know how
the B-side is probably just on the album.
Yeah, they must have been. So yeah. So anyways, Mausoleum of Infringing Evil and Sadistic. That was Sadistic and Mausoleum of Infringing Evil. So, and thanks Jay for those comments. So I'm returning back to the booklet here and kind of where I left off, and it says Screams of Anguish was finally released in the summer of '93, instantly blowing metal fans away. The full-length debut brought 10 electrifying compositions showcasing technical death metal at its finest. The band's motto was to create music to mangle your minds, and this is clearly visible on Screams of Anguish. Isn't Music to Mangle Your Minds the nuclear blast?
That's their slogan.
That's their slogan, yeah. So I don't know if the band's motto was that.
I think that's just some playful word
exactly.
usage.
And this was clearly visible on Screams of Anguish. Complicated yet melodic guitar riffs, intense drumming with a jazzy feel to it, and deep death metal growling made up for one of the most impressive death metal releases of the 90s. Songs such as Cries of the Forsaken and These Walls Shall Be Your Grave are perfect examples of prime death metal ferocity, while the acoustic guitar piece Sympathy stands out as a very interesting interlude. Jim Coker's drumming is definitely the album's highlight, as he ranges from all kinds of inspirations. The listener witnesses a truly magnificent performance produced by Jim Morris. Brutality's debut album was an excellent way to start a career on the scene. Unfortunately, soon after its release, Jay Fernandez quit the band and was replaced with Brian Hipp. Soon after that, Brutality went on tour to promote the album. They played a number of shows in the US and Europe where they supported Hypocrisy.
I know at one point, one of their tours, they were down a guitarist and just played with a single guitarist. It's like,
that seems
it'd
weird.
be real limiting.
I mean, you can hear, like, even when we get, like, even the loss of Jay, which we'll get to not in this set of music, but the next set of music, there's a noticeable difference when you get to When the Sky Turns Black.
Yeah.
Even though they have a second guitarist there, he's just not the same as Jay. What Jay brings to the table is, you know, you said you kind of looked into some of his influences a little bit, right?
He was saying he was mentioned. Like, Steve Vai and Malmsteen, Vinnie Moore, Satriani. He liked the melody and hooks and Flash.
Yeah. And you can tell, like, he sort of brings that. I mean, there's some certain aspects of what he does that reminds me of, like, if George Lynch was, like, playing in a twin lead death metal band. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, and the other guy's doing standard kind of death metal solos.
Well, a lot of, like, dive bomby stuff that was, like, very Slayer-esque that is, fit kind of Slayer perfectly, but, 5 years after Slayer, like, you got to up your game.
Sure. It's almost like he has, like, some of the same melodic kind of qualities and influences that maybe, like, a guy like Micah Mott had. Where Micah Mott brings, like, a flashier kind of death metal style to it, and he's brighter than a lot of, like, the other death metal guitar players at the time. That's kind of something that stands out to me too. Jeff Akers kind of talks to the main kind of guy later on in the booklet, and he says, in 1992 we recorded a 3-song demo for labels only. The 3 songs were Sadistic, Cryptorium, and Spawned Illusion. When we recorded the demo, the band consisted of Jeff Akers on bass and vocals, Jay Fernandez on guitar, Don Gates on guitar, Jim Coker on drums. We got a lot of interest from several labels and signed with Nuclear Blast for a 7-8 album deal.
I don't think that was unheard of.
Wow. 7 albums?
I know Dismember was on there for 7 albums, or maybe more.
That just seems like a crazy contract in hindsight. You just don't hear, like, you don't even hear that in sports, like rookie contracts, like them sending like a 7-year contract right off the bat.
I feel like
that must have been standard practice.
Benediction, Hypocrisy, all those have been on forever.
That must have been the standard Nuclear Blast contract then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then usually if there's anything like, I think Earache still, has rights to music in perpetuity, but I think Nuclear Blast was like a 20-year deal. I think Century Media was the same. And a lot of these bands now are getting there because I think Brutality got the rights to all their music back. And they've actually reissued all 3 records at the time that were out on LP and stuff now. So they've done that themselves.
That's good. Yeah. So we did the 7-album deal before we recorded the album. Nuclear Blast released a 7-inch EP called Sadistic, which had Sadistic and Spawned Illusion. They also released Cryptorium on the Death is Just the Beginning 2 compilation.
Good series.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about that in a second, like what your guys' thoughts are on that. During this time, Scott Regal on vocals joined the band. Scott and myself did a lot of double vocals, which made the music even heavier. We went into Morris Sound Studios in the fall of '92 to start recording the Screams of Anguish LP. The album was released in early 93 to great reviews. After recording Screams, Jay Fernandez was replaced by Brian Hipp. A European tour with Hypocrisy followed, but Don Gates was not able to do the tour because of some personal reasons.
So that's when they were just, I think that's adds to their not, people not seeing them at their best.
Yeah. So, but
it's like seeing Maiden with one guitarist instead of three.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that wouldn't work. I mean, it's weird because, you go on like Metal Archives and this album's sitting at 92%. Mm-hmm. So like there is a,
with like 7 reviews or something.
Yeah, 7 reviews. But like people like, it's like people who listen to this album like it. Mm-hmm. It's whether you like have spent time with it,
I think they're one of those in retrospect bands, people are like, oh shit, this is something we missed.
So in hindsight, like when you guys were doing Requiem, this was like not something you guys like actively pursued to like do an interview, or they were just kind of like another periphery kind of band that was like, oh, this is pretty good.
I honestly thought I did an interview with them and I looked through every issue and I couldn't find it. So I think I was just thinking of Resurrection, who was another Tampa band.
Yeah, or something like, Resurrection, Monstro. Yeah, there was all kinds of, stuff going on.
But I'm pretty sure like we positively reviewed it. It might have even been on like one of my playlists at some point. If
cool. Yeah.
Went back and looked at it, but they were just one of the like, it was cool, but then you jumped on. Everything was jumping to something like, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? Like, black metal's coming up, and then
melodic stuff is starting to bubble out of At the Gates and things like that.
There's just so much stuff that you just couldn't listen to it all.
Yep, it was tough. I think one thing about the way that Akers sort of described doing the backup vocals that gave like Regal this kind of like extra layer. It kind of reminds me of like Carl with Bolt Thrower, or like even Dave Ingram with Benediction. Mm-hmm. Some of like the way that those vocals kind of come across on Screams Anguish, One of the things that was really interesting too, I found, was Coker wrote all the lyrics. So it's like a Neil Peart situation.
Okay.
Yeah. That's kind of interesting. I didn't really look too much into the lyrics, but hey.
I didn't either.
But kind of the album opens up with kind of this 1-2 punch of These Walls Shall Be Your Grave and Ceremonial Unearthing. And I just said like, both these songs kind of open Screams with a pretty awesome kind of like visceral punch. I said Coker's really doing like these kind of Pete Sandoval sort of chops, and the twin leads allow Fernandez and Gates to sort of meander and explore, and that's evident from like the leads that sort of bubble up from the abyss all throughout like these two songs. I said the melodic combo was like, who else rivaled these two guys in terms of being like twin lead death metal guitar players? I said
Trey and
Steer and Amat.
Yeah, I think Trey and
Chuck and whoever he was playing with, maybe Murphy.
Fuck was that other dude?
Richard Brunel?
Richard Brunel.
Was Brunel on Blessed too, or just on Altars?
He's on Blessed.
Okay, I couldn't remember. But by the time you get to Covenant, it's just Trey.
It's just Trey.
Yeah. So it's interesting. It's just there weren't a lot of like twin lead death metal bands that were like both doing almost like the same thing Maiden or Priest was doing, where they're like intersecting with each other. It was usually a rhythm and a lead.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it would be like the Obituary situation where it's like Alan West doing the leads, or James Murphy, and then Trevor Perez is just kind of chugging.
Yeah, yeah. Whereas like, Chuck was always like intersecting leads with people, whoever he was playing with, and like I said, Steer and Amat kind of jump out too. It's like two guys that were kind of doing trading off solos and things like that.
I mean, to a different degree, I think Mitch and
Jesse
Pintado.
Yeah, I guess. They weren't flashy like this, though.
They were flashy, but they were going back and forth with, it was like, flurries of solo stuff, but like they're going back and forth with like catchy fucking
that's true
breakdowns.
yeah. Celtic Frost kind of offs and stuff like that. I love the way that like it blasts right into the pummel of Ceremonial Unearthing. Right from These Walls. Jim Morris really gets this sort of pure death metal sound out of these guys. It's one of the better produced Morris sound albums in hindsight. Like it just really sounds fantastic.
It sounds produced like Tom Morris's Morbid Angel production. It has that kind of clarity to it.
Yeah.
And warmth and analog.
Jim Morris did like Sound of Perseverance and stuff too. So he was, Scott Burns gets a lot of the attention, but I feel like what the Morris guys were often doing was like had a little extra care sometimes, or a little
they were
je ne sais quoi.
They had the first dibs on what they produced.
Yeah, that's true. So that's really interesting that Jim would like jump on doing this. I mean, he did the Metamorphosis thing a couple years prior, so maybe he just was really like, oh, these guys are really musical,
Sure, yeah.
He's probably into like what they were kind of putting together and stuff. But it's cool, those like crushing guitars and the like, to me, like the drums, especially on Ceremonial Unearthing, are very like Covenant like. you know, like what Pete does on Covenant, where it's like these, it's not as like visceral necessarily as like Altars or whatever, but it's like colder and just like
calculated. And
like there's something about Covenant that's just like so well produced, and it's like this perfect death metal sort of sounding record, you know. So those are both like fun tunes to sort of kick things off. Crushed is kind of comes after this piece that we're not playing called Sympathy. There's two sort of like interesting kind of instrumental pieces on the record, Spirit World, which we are going to hear, and then Sympathy. Sympathy was kind of interesting too, that Jay wrote it, and it's kind of got like some, it goes on for a little too long. I don't know if you like,
it's like 3 minutes instead of a minute.
It's interesting though. You know, they're trying stuff, but
in the context of the full record, it's interesting.
Helps break up some stuff a little bit, but so that kind of, so the sort of cool synth choir acoustic piece Sympathy leads into Crushed, and I'm sorry, after the cool, it goes from Sympathy to a song that we're not playing called Septicemic Plague, then it goes into Crush. So I don't know why my notes are fucking confusing. I know why, because I was writing these under the influence of things. So this is my first experience doing Mark's advice of like,
do some note taking, some deep listening, and throw an edible in it.
Throw an edible in there and see what sort of happens. And then I was like, what the fuck does that even mean?
It left me with
you said you contemplated on some really interesting things.
2 pages of gibberish that could probably be summed up in a sentence or two.
Hey, perfect for a Patreon show, right? Yeah. And to me, like what you hear on Crushed is this really fulfills the destiny of like that bolt thrower, warlike kind of blasting precision mixed with some of the pinch harmonics of like Immolation.
Yeah, they're definitely there.
Lots of doomier elements that I think you kind of start to pick up on that maybe, you know, I might have mentioned with Cries of the Forsaken, I can't remember. And you hear it in kind of some of the slower parts like that Obituary or Cannibal would do, or even like Malevolent Creation when they just like kind of grind to a halt. I don't know if I'm hearing like the doomier aspects that you hear in like Autopsy, because it's like more precise. So I don't know if Autopsy is really a band that they're drawing from as much.
Well, I think they're both, Autopsy and Brutality are both just drawn from Sabbath, because they, you know, later on they do the Electric Funeral,
which is really fucking interesting for a cover. It's one of the reasons I kind of kept it on. Normally I would steer clear of it, but I was like, this is kind of an interesting interpretation when we get to it. But so it's, you know, it goes to those sort of doomier elements. And then I said, what separates them from the pack is at 3:45 of like a song like Crushed. And that's when this delicate, heartfelt, European melodious guitar line breaks through the dissonance and these solos that just kind of like fucking trade off. I said it's almost like Uli from Scorpions if he was like in a tech death band. Do you know how like Uli's just got this like organic, really analog, beautiful, even though he's flashy, he still sounds like really like bubbling and organic with that Scorpion stuff that he was doing. That's what I feel like Jay and Don like bring together. It's the thing that like Chuck always had. Chuck was super technical, but he was like really heartfelt all the time. It never felt cold and calculated.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I don't know who else, like Micah Mott and Bill kind of had that too. Like they were technical, but never so technical that it like became sterile.
Well, you could hear emotion, and it wasn't just this like flurry of masturbatory shit. Yeah. They would like, if it needed to slow down, like they did whatever it needed to kind of fit the vibe of the song. It wasn't like just like hammer-ons and dive bombs and just a million notes.
Yeah,
it seemed a little more thoughtful.
Yeah, it's like these tasty melodic kind of things, and I associate it more with like European metal of the 80s a little bit. You know, it's the kind of stuff you would have heard. Like even Fate did that a little bit too.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, King Diamond and Fate and some of that kind of stuff. And then we go from there into Spirit World, which this is an instrumental piece produced by Don Gates. It kind of predicts some of the cool acoustic kind of interludes that we're going to hear like throughout the like rest of the 90s, like Tiamat Wild Honey.
Some dissection there.
Dissection. Yeah, I said At the Gates, like Terminal Spirit Disease and Slaughter. Even Sound of Perseverance has that instrumental piece on it. It's escaping me. It's like track 7. I'm trying to remember what the fuck it is. I should know that. But
I can't think what it's called.
Yeah, it's, you know, beautiful, eerie, mood setting, breath catching. You know, it's just like it's like a perfect way when you're coming out of like bands that are just hitting you with these fucking face melting solos that you can kind of like.
I think in the context of the record, you need little palate cleanse after because the vocals are high in the mix, but he's a good vocalist and he enunciates well. You can understand what he's saying, but it's still like it's a lot.
He's hitting you. Yeah, for sure. And then we're gonna end this set with Cryptorium, and this is the song that appeared before even before Screams of Anguish came out, like I think the previous year on the second Death is Just the Beginning. Like, how influential were those compilations for like you and Chris when those like Death is Just the Beginning
first couple were great because a lot of the time they'd throw a different version of a song on there too, or there'd be like 3 or 4 best of whoever it might have been, and then there'd be like, oh, here's like a demo version of Where Dead Angels Lie or something.
Yeah. I have a Death is Just the Beginning VHS. It's like a collection of videos from a whole bunch of the bands.
Does it have the purple gravestone on the front of it?
It might, yeah.
Okay.
Pretty interesting that was kind of coming out too.
Yeah, they would do the compilations of videos on there too. Like Benediction, Dismember, like on Frozen Fields or something's on one of those. But yeah, it was just like it was a cool comp, but also they usually had like some demo versions or bonus tracks or stuff that you didn't have on the regular albums.
I just didn't know for like people like you guys or young like death metal fans, like how important those like samplers were in the early 90s, if they had like the impact that like tape trading had like in the 80s for people pre-internet.
Yeah, we were kind of ahead of those a bit. Like we usually had. I
was going to say, you guys were probably getting that stuff. But I know like what the identity comps meant for me. Like,
I think it was definitely a cool, like if you went into the shop with, you only had, and they were usually lower price too. Mm-hmm. You only had $10, you could actually get a sampler of everything on this label instead of like risking with some unknown thing you didn't have any idea about.
Yeah. I know what was the one that you and Chris always talked pretty fondly about? I have
Beauty and Darkness #1.
No, not that one so much. It was the Century Media sampler. They had like Unleashed and that was the one you guys kind of talked pretty highly about.
Beyond the Eyes of Death or something?
In the Eyes of Death. Yeah. So
great cover on it. And, but that had like a different version of like Winter Shadow or something from TMA.
Okay. But I think of like the War Comp, like that was a big deal, even the Projection Stained Mind, stuff like that, so it was a different era. It's kind of like soundtracks. When we did the 90s soundtrack episode, like that meant something because of the samplers. Like it was introducing people to bands, and now with the internet, you don't really need fucking samplers. It's just not like
it doesn't make sense with technology the way it is right now.
Yeah, it's just not a thing anymore. So it's a lost art. But yeah, if you're not familiar, if you're younger and don't know what we're talking about, these Death of Just the Beginning, I feel like they did
a lot.
There
might be 10.
I stopped paying attention like after 4 or 5, maybe.
Yeah, and then they did like the Firestarter stuff that was like...
That was Century Media. Firestarter comp is actually really all black metal awesome. Shit? Yeah. That's... When you look at that from start to finish, it's honestly maybe one of the best lineups ever.
Well, I think they licensed a bunch of shit too, like from...
Candlelight and stuff. So you had Emperor, you had Arcturus.
Satyricon on that too?
Satyricon. I mean, you had Ulver. I mean, that was like fucking... It was almost everybody but like Dark Throne and Immortal weren't on there. It was like the Osmos and Moonfog stuff was pretty much the only things missing. But it had like everything. Aphalamia was on there. I mean, it was fucking like tits.
I don't know if Osmos ever did one of those.
Yeah, I don't think they did. So, one thing I noticed besides like the twin leads in a song like Cryptorium is like the way that they kind of pull off the twin leads in the way that like Maiden or Priest did is like the way they intertwine the ferocity of the solos. That was something like Maiden was always melodious, obviously, right? It reminds me of sort of like Rust in Peace, but like death metal. Yeah, like the way in which like Friedman and like Mustaine were like just like battling and dueling like the whole time.
Well, you'd think, like another
like Tornado of Souls,
another chorus would come back in, but no, it's like 4 guitar solos back to back to back to back to back.
Fight. And I feel like that's what Jay and Don are doing throughout the record, but it's super tasteful. It's never like it's never distracting. It's like, oh shit, this is what I want. Oh, game on. It's like a rap battle. Like, no, you think you can do this? All right, I'll fucking show you this,
Yeah.
And it adds this kind of cool intensity that you hear, that you associate with songs like Holy Wars or Tornado of Souls or Hangar 18 or
well, there's even like the Cries. There's a riff that's like really complimentary of the opening riff of Cries of the Forsaken. That's on Cryptorium.
On Cryptorium
as well. It almost seems like it's you know how Bolt Thrower would bring in the the same type of bit over and over with like 4 different songs or whatever.
Yeah.
It's probably it's not probably intentional, but I just noticed that popped through. Like that could be an interest if it's more of a concept record to kind of bring that stuff back a little bit or here and there.
Yeah, but this is it. This is like, to me, this is the masterpiece of this band. They put out some other really good material, but Screams of Anguish, if you're gonna get one Brutality record for all time, like start with this and then kind of branch out from there. And this is like everybody's firing on cylinders, and
you get some underwater vocal effect, a little God of Emptiness vibe.
I was gonna say a little bit more of that Covenant kind of vibe going on. I mean, I guess when you've been working on your debut for like 5 years, it should be pretty fucking good.
Well, they always say you're writing your first album your entire life. The second one's
this is a
pain in the ass.
Great example of that band. So let's get into it. We've got These Walls Shall Be Your Grave, Ceremonial, Unearthing, Crushed, Spirit World, and then we'll end with Cryptorium. That was Cryptorium, Spirit World, Crushed, Ceremonial, Unearthing, and then we start it with These Walls Shall Be Your Grave, which Mark just remarked reminded him of a late 90s, early 2000s like metalcore.
Yeah.
Would you say a metalcore band name or album title?
I would say name.
Name? Yeah, These Walls Shall Be Your Grave. Yeah, Red Roses for a Blue Lady or some fucking bullshit that was going on.
When everything was a phrase instead of like two words or one word.
Yeah. Fucking breakup core and some of that kind of stuff. Yeah, exactly. Basically, like when you get to the next record, which technically Metal Archive says 94, but the more I researched it, it seems that it was recorded in 94, but it wasn't actually technically released in 95, and that's what this says. So I'm going to go with this. So I changed the dates.
I mean, that sounds right to me.
Yeah. So yeah, 2 years later, we get When the Sky Turns Black, and in that the Brutality booklets, they talk more about this. It says the group's second album, When the Sky Turns Black, was recorded in the end of 94 and released in 95. The follow-up brought another dose of perfectly balanced technical death metal, this time aiming at a truly apocalyptic atmosphere. All 10 compositions joined together in perfect harmony, creating a soundtrack to an end of the world filled with various acoustic interludes. The album depicts a vision of total mayhem with the help of epic guitar riffs and melancholic solos, again produced by Jim Morris. When the Sky Turns Black stands out as one of Brutality's most unique offerings. This LP features also a stunning cover version of Black Sabbath's classic Electric Funeral, by many fans considered superior to the original.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Yeah, it's unique. It's like Type O. It puts its stamp on it, and I give them that.
They definitely turned it into a Brutality song more than most covers.
The release of the album was crowned with over a 1.5 month long European tour with Bolt Thrower and Cemetery. After the tour, Don Gates decided to leave Brutality for personal reasons, and Brian Hipp got fired from the band. Soon the guitar slots were filled with Dana Walsh and Pete Sykes, and with the lineup, Brutality entered the studio to record their third and final, as it soon appeared, album. Well, final when they released these Metal Minds like 12 years ago. We'll sort of get to that. So yeah, they bring in Brian Hipp to replace Jay on guitar for When the Sky Turns Black. Vocally, like, to me, this album feels a lot more kind of Dave Ingram, kind of Benediction-y a little bit. Not that it didn't have that element, but it kind of leans in on that a little bit. The musicianship is more tight, and it's like it feels more like tightly wound. The solos are a little less flashy and mind-melting. I don't know if that's the lack of Jay. Jay brought, like you said, that Steve Vai kind of flash into things.
Yeah.
The rhythm section is probably the highlight for this record for me, more almost than the solos. I mean, Coker's performance is really, really special. And I think for me, the opening 4 songs give a really fascinating picture of where the band's kind of at. And that's kind of like what we sort of basically picked here, the opening 4 songs to sort of kickstart everything.
On the first 2, I've got a bracket around that just says Morbid Angel Covenant.
Yeah. And that's what Coker's doing. And to be able to like be close to what Pete's doing, there were very few drummers that could like stand in that arena. And I feel like Coker's not Pete. Nobody's Pete, but he's like up there, like he's doing some things, some tasteful things that like these decisions that Pete did, kind of like how Dave Lombardo would do like extra things that like just made him stand out from other thrash guys. I feel like Coker's kind of doing extra little touches and things like that, the title track that we're going to kind of kick things off with, I said I love the dual melody tremola that just rolls over you. It's a little bit more bizarre, almost Trey-esque. There's some like Trey kind of type solos. It's not as, I said, this is a question I asked. Was Jay the melody Amat guy? Because I think he was. Yeah. And so when you remove him from the equation, it's a little bit more, it's darker. It's a darker record, right? It's not as bright. I feel like it's a little bit more suffocating what it's doing. I think it all has a kind of samey vibe that Screams doesn't. And I think that's more like what you would hear like Immolation or Incantation do, right? Yeah. Like they were doing more, and not samey in a bad way, but samey in like it's going to feel this gloomy atmosphere over it.
Yeah.
Whereas like Screams of Anguish felt like a great collection of really musical songs. You're right. Like the songs all sound similar, but like they're all like have their own like flashy, cool little moments or melodic kind of elements. And this just feels like condensed. It's just like a force, The production's kind of more condensed, tunnelish, constricted. There's like a weird vibe kind of going on there too. Absolutely. Then you get to Race Defects, Deflects. Did I say Defects? I can't remember.
Well,
what the hell does it say?
What's it say on the thing? Because it says
let me look.
Race. I've seen it say Race Deflects. I think
Defects. Yeah,
so that makes more sense.
Yeah, that was just a misspelling that didn't catch on my playlist there. But I love the open, clean guitar, eerie opening before it blasts and grooves its way. It kind of reminds me of Individual Thought Pattern kind of territory. And Coker is almost doing like Hoagland stuff, like what you would have heard Hoagland's choices that he made on like Individual Thought. I love the vocal performance here on this track, and how the song kind of melts directly into the sort of awakening tune, That's another Don Gates kind of instrumental. We heard, Crushed or Spirit World, in the previous one. And this is the one where I hear a lot of Paul Masvidal, kind of like cynic, kind of like stuff sort of happening here. And I think it's important too, like, there's another instrumental later in the album called Esoteric. And so like, when you're throwing this much at the listener, it kind of does help break things up. I don't know, like what was your guys' opinion back in the day where like all the stuff like Morbid Angel did on Blessed of the Sick, was that like filler for you guys, or did you like listen to them as complete pieces of music? Because nowadays it's everything, people are just listening to songs on Spotify, so it's less important to have those like linkages.
Yeah.
But like back in the day when you put a record on, like, did you feel that flow, and did it help you to get a breathing moment to appreciate the other songs?
I think Blessed was a unique, that was a kind of a unique thing.
Yeah.
I can't think of who else was doing that to that extent. You know, everybody was doing intro and outro tracks at that point.
But this is like more fully involved, these songs. They're like 3 minutes each. Like they're actually putting some time and effort into the compositions a little more.
Yeah, like Blessed was more of it was like a classical vibe in between each. It just, it kind of made more sense. These are more of like, you've got little, you know, segments of songs, a block of songs.
It's like an idea.
And then this like takes us to the next idea.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. It's kind of like a connecting to like the next kind of like movement or something like that.
Yeah.
And then we go into Electric Funeral, the aforementioned. I just wrote, normally we wouldn't play a cover song unless it was earned, like kind of typo, but I kind of love their approach, this Sabbath classic.
It's pretty over the top too.
I mean, like the original Electric Funeral, I talked about this in the Alice in Chains episode, but like that whole song, Electric Funeral, was basically the nightmare fuel for like Jerry Cantrell's like riff writing. Like that's like the wow, 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 wow. Like that's the Alice in Chains kind of like riff right there.
Totally.
This song kind of attacks like with like this Nocturnus style guitar flurries that sort of represent Nuclear Winter. They're almost like showing you what the sound of that from the lyrics kind of feels like. I think that's kind of cool to like represent that. I love the groovy midsection stomp, you know, which obviously the original sort of has. That's kind of new for Brutality. I thought that was kind of fun to sort of throw in. And you get a kind of killer like Brian Hipp solo at the end that kind of puts like the Florida stamp like right on Sabbath. That's something you never would have heard Iommi do, clearly. You know, something as kind of great as that. So I kind of dig it when a band like makes a cover song kind of their own. You know?
I mean, they definitely did that.
There's a lot of I've heard a lot of bad Sabbath covers in my day, and this one was like at least interesting.
Zero the Hero from Cannibal.
It's pretty rough.
Just like, if you got a certain type of vocal, it's funny hearing Scott almost like not when they do like the Electric Funeral, like the three repetitive things is like trying to catch his bark, because that dude's like a full voice growler when you see him live.
Have you seen these guys live? Did you guys ever see him back in the day?
Maybe.
Okay.
I just watched a bunch of YouTube videos.
Okay.
And these are like current YouTube videos, and he's still blasting.
We'll talk about near the end of the episode, but like they kind of reformed and played Maryland Death Fest in
I think it was
2019, I think 2018 or 2019.
2019.
Yeah.
I was watching some of it.
Yeah. So, and actually that new EP that we'll talk about at the end of the episode has like 4 of the songs in that EP are from Maryland Death Fest. Pretty cool.
Oh yeah, all the live stuff. Yep. Are they throwing something else on that too, or?
Yeah. The song we're going to end with is like there's 2 new cuts on it, and then there's 2 re-recordings, and then 4 live songs. So it's 8 songs. Yeah,
because I was listening to an interview with them where they're talking about that they've got other stuff already written, and
they're
thinking about doing something
cool stopgap kind of thing. So, and then we're going to end the whole set, the When the Sky Turns Black set, with a tune called Shrine of the Master. And
sounds like a goat horse song.
Yeah, yes, it does. And this is like the album closer, and so I thought it'd be a nice song to sort of close the sort of set with. And it's pummeling, you know. It's this sort of technical pulverizing is what I sort of wrote, kind of like Covenant. Covenant was like technical pulverizing, right?
Like Morbid Angel ! But like more like Swedish melodic death metal riffing. There's like a borderline black metal riff toward the end.
They do some like tremolo,
like a dissection solo.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, I love that quick little hip solo at the end that goes right into the fade is pretty fucking cool. And there's these like really cool Coker blast patterns that he's doing throughout like the middle section of this. That's really cool. And Jeff Akers, I said, is slaying on the bass in this song. So
you should see him too when he's playing. He just
is he fucking going for it? Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. So all right, well, let's get into it. Let's get into When the Sky Turns Black, the title track. Then we have Race Defects, Awakening, the Electric Funeral cover, and then we'll end with Shrine of the Master.
Lightning smashes earth.
Shrine of the Master, Electric Funeral, Awakening, Race Defects, and When the Sky Turns Black from their second release, When the Sky Turns Black. I forgot to point out, too, Race Defects was on Death is Just the Beginning, Part 3.
Ah, yes.
So they made on Part 2, Part 3. I don't know if anything from In Mourning ended up on any of the other parts, but so now we kind of go into like the weird era, and this is sort of like, man, talk about no man's land. 1996 American death metal. It's like a weird place to be, right? Like outside of like Domination from like Morbid Angel, and maybe
even that was pushing some people. I didn't buy it when it came out.
I was into Domination because I was like,
I liked it years later.
I was the right age for it. I was still kind of like had one foot in mainstream and one foot not. But yeah, like that's a real weird era for American death metal. I mean, we're fully on board with like the Swedish stuff by that point, especially melodic death metal. It's really taken off. I mean, Carcass is sort of broken up. Napalm's in a weird kind of post diatribes kind of place. A lot of your mainstays who were there in the late 80s, early 90s, even like the non-American bands, like Entombed's in a pretty weird place by like 96. Mm-hmm. Dismember's pretty consistent. They're like
they're still doing their thing.
They're still doing their thing.
They've
but
got
like
a little more Iron Maiden coming through.
Death metal and Hate Campaign are like, fine records. They're not my favorites of them, but they're
I do like death metal a lot. Mostly because of the Autopsy cover.
Oh yeah. But it's just like it's kind of just like a weird era, I think. And I think to place like the late 90s from 96 on in context, especially with death metal, because if you weren't doing melodic death metal in 96, or you weren't, like I said, Morbid Angel or like Death, Sound of Perseverance, which comes out 2 years later, the
People
spotlight
black
was,
metal right now.
Yeah, black metal is in. Black metal and like, Gothenburg, At the Gate, Slaughter of the Soul. Like that's the kind of stuff.
At the Gates and Dissection or like King
Gallery is coming out around that time. So it's just a different time period. And so, the band is going to, change things up. They're going to they changed their logo. It kind of, I don't know if you've looked at it, but it looks like more like something that would be on like Victory Records for In Mourning.
Yeah, go look at that real quick.
They add a little bit more of that kind of punishing like groove that like, metal and hardcore would kind of seep its way kind of in, right? Can you see the logo?
Yeah, I mean, this is like Obituary World Downfall, the same kind of like shitty photo collage design.
Oh, World Demise, you mean?
World Demise, yeah.
World Downfall's not shitty.
That's a wonderful record.
Yeah. But it's just weird that it kind of seeps its way into the album's DNA, and I think it's a sign of the times. You had to like adapt or die, and
this is definitely more doomy.
Yeah, it's doomy. There's catchier vocal hooks. They only have one guitarist on the record, Dana Walsh. Scott's doing, like I said, more catchy vocal hooks. But there's still like enough like Akers Coker kind of rhythmic ideas and some kind of twisted as fuck solos and riffs that still make it fun. It's maybe not the most essential, probably the least essential, actually, if I was going to pick out of their 4 kind of full lengths.
Yeah,
I think I like the Sea of Ignorance a little bit more, Here's what they said in the booklet about In Mourning, which is in 96. It says, recorded in late 95, In Mourning was released in the following year. The album continued the apocalyptic tradition, bringing yet another handful of destructive anthems. Coker's drumming became even more vicious on the release and was paired with some of the intense guitar solos, which gave the LP a very classic feel. In Mourning delivers the same amount of disturbing atmosphere as the previous offerings, this time, however, building it solely on guitar sounds. The album went on as Brutality's most mature release, but unfortunately, it also marked the end of the band, as after a number of shows promoting the LP, the musicians grew tired of playing, and eventually in late 97, early 98, they decided to part ways with each other. In 2001, after nearly 10 years, Akers and Sapp finally met again and started working on Brutality's reunion, involving the band's original members, as well as the musicians from Astrogoth. New material has been written as Brutality began planning the release of their new LP, which was to be entitled From the Darkness. After a failed record deal in 2003, the band once again went on hiatus. In early 2008, Brutality resurfaced, hopefully this time to stick around for good. So that's it's funny that these are written before we get to Sea of Ignorance and the Runes of the Humans in 2013 and beyond. So
yeah.
So it's interesting when I'm looking at like the show notes or the sort of lineup here, and it's like Calculated Bloodshed 1996, and then the next song is 2013.
Yep.
And that's that's the kind of shit like Carcass did. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like to have that kind of a leap and stuff.
27 years.
Yeah, that's a pretty sizable. No, that would be only. No, it was 17.
Carcass was that 27 or was it 17?
No, that was 95 to 2013. Is that when that Carcass came out? I think it was like 2013. Yeah. So
I remember Chris called me on the phone.
Yeah.
I remember the apartment I was living in. He played me one of the tracks over the phone off of Surgical Steel.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because you had moved out by then.
Yeah, I was living where I lived, same city I live in now, but above that pharmacy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yep. By Rallies, across from Checkers.
No, Checkers was down by the other end of town. There used to be a Wendy's across the street. They closed down. Now it's a fish you buy, we fry place.
Fuck yeah. You buy, we fry, man. Yeah. Yeah, so it's kind of an interesting thing. But yeah, I never picked up In Mourning when it came out. I don't know if
I don't even know it came out. I never knew it came out.
Apparently it's a Metal Mind release. According to this, it says like they've released Metal Mind, so now I need to track that down because it's a Metal Mind.
I have the Metal Mind versions of these two records.
Yeah, so I never had In Mourning.
CD, but yeah,
kind of interesting. But Yeah, it's like I said, the two songs we sort of picked out, they're not bad songs. Destroyed by Society, the first minute and a half is pretty standard, I guess. I wrote pretty standard 1996 American Extreme. You got pinch harmonics. You can feel the weight of domination on this. Like they definitely, the influence of that record.
Let's put, Do Me with tremolo riffs. And then I put Sports.
Sports.
These guys seem like
backwards? Is this the backwards hat kind of reference
was my,
you're gonna get to?
This is when I was stoned and
Sports.
Jay might appreciate. Yeah, backwards hat, athletic metal.
I like that. So is that what the sports means?
Yeah, I think so. That was my first.
Yeah, but I guess on the second half of the song, you get like chugging squeals, like kind of floodgates of this, into this
fucking
incredible
My Dying
soul.
Bride, man.
Yeah,
That's
it's
what
like
I was listening to
Immolation,
this and I was
Bride,
like,
kind of.
Oh yeah, this is like Bride's pinch harmonic phase.
Yep. I said, you get, what I wrote? I said, in the second half of the song, the chugging squeals floodgates into an incredible solo at the 2:10 mark that collides with death precision while the pinches slice through the listener. Man, I was really poetic when I was writing this note.
Catchy with morbid undulation, like Morbid Angel, the undulation.
That's that
the
domination.
Bounce. Yeah.
Yep. And then you go right into Calculated Bloodshed, the other tune we're going to play from In Mourning. I said, super bolt thrower, and I'm here for it.
I put the bolt thrower bounce.
There you go. Yeah, fucking A. I said Coker even evokes like a lot of the sort of honor, valor, pride kind of drum sounds, even a little bit.
Yeah.
So he kind of mimics that a bit. I love the breakdown at 2:15. Where is your God? It's a pretty cool part. And then the solo that kind of fucking follows it.
With Ruins of Humans, that there's like a Queen sounding guitar lead in that. Where it's like that full chorus on it, where it's like wearing
Brian
really
May?
bright thing. Yeah.
That bright. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. When we talk about Ruins of Humans, basically it was a digital 2-song EP that was put out in 2013 for Ceremonial Records. And you got Jeff back, Jim's back, and Scott's back. And they're rejoined by Don Gates and Jay Fernandez, the two guitar players from Screams of Anguish. And they record at Morrisound with Jim Morris. For only this Ruins of Humans. I don't think they do Sea of Ignorance at Morrisound. I'd have to double check, but
I don't think they do. But
yeah, this is fucking super accessible, old school feel, less technical than their first two. I said it's got more of like a Suffocation style. Scott's vocals are pretty fierce and the lyrics are pretty timely. The Ruins of Humanity and kind of environmental degradation kind of stuff. I said it's nearly 4 minutes before we get our first face-melting guitar solo, though.
This was recorded in Orlando.
Oh.
New Constellations.
With Morris?
Let me see. It is with other staff. Producer, engineer, Jarrett Pritchard.
Huh. Wait, is that Sea of Ignorance or is that
That's
Ruins of Humans?
Sea of Ignorance.
Yeah, okay. I was going to say, I think my notes, I had Ruins of Humans with Morris sounds. Yeah, Pritchard. Yep, that's right.
The dude from Eulogy. Who Jay used to play with for a while. He played with them live. So.
I don't know Eulogy. Have you listened much?
They're that band I was telling you about. I told you about the logo because I recognized it from.
Okay.
We interviewed him in Requiem in like first or second issue.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah.
Okay, so they've been around a while then.
Yeah, they were a demo band, and their first, was it 92 was their first demo?
Okay. Yeah, I have to check out some Eulogy. So there you go.
I don't remember what it sounded like at all, but the logo is cool.
Yeah, we'll listen to it after the show. We'll listen to a song. But yeah, so I mean, it takes a while. Ruins of Humans is kind of a longer tune, but like I said, 4 minutes, and then you get fucking this face melting kind of solo. But I said the band's in no hurry with this tune. Jeff Akers is also doing some killer bass work. Around like the 4:43 mark, him and Coker work some nice kind of Morbid Angel. I said, Blessed are the Sick, kind of rhythmic blasting interplay. That kind of like that thing that like Blessed are the Sick just does like mechanically. It's really cool. And then speaking of guitars, at the fucking 7-minute mark of this song, Mark, welcome back, Jay. Holy shit. It's everything you love with, the Screams of Anguish. It just kind of all comes floodgating back on Ruins of Humans. Pretty cool shit. Fatal Cure, the first tune from Sea of Ignorance, basically, is Sea of Ignorance was put out 3 years later in 2016. It's the last full length and a welcome return from the band. After 20, that's their first full length in 20 years. Unfortunately, no Coker on drums.
No.
And no Gates. Don
Only
Gates
one
is
guitar
gone too. Yeah.
And the production's kind of flat.
Yeah, it's weird. Yeah, I wish they had gone to more sound.
It's kind of like a weird, it's like a modern-ish sound, but it doesn't really do them a whole lot of justice.
Yeah. I guess the thing that like kind of reminds me a little bit of that last Heathen record where, you know, we kind of talked about, you know, their classic stuff from like the late 80s, early 90s, but then like they just put out like a new record a couple years ago, and it took me a couple spins, but I kind of warmed up on it a bit.
Yeah.
You know, almost like that Sacred Reich too. It took me a couple spins, but you know, Jay seems more well suited to like kind of dual guitar stuff. And so it's kind of like interesting for him to be by himself on this record, you know? I'm hoping maybe whatever they put out in like 2022 or 2023, like they maybe brought in a second guitar player.
Yeah.
Kind of interesting to see what Jay has to say about that in the interview that we'll do, you know? But they bring in, God, I forgot. I didn't write it. Oh, Rustin Gross is his name, is the new drummer. So he's solid. He's not bad.
Yeah.
You know? But he doesn't do those like extra
personality is the same. It doesn't have the same like drumming personality.
Absolutely.
It's tough to. I mean, like anybody that's followed Andy Whale has always sounded like Andy Whale.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or at least like, okay, this is the template of what our drumming sounds like.
Yeah.
So
I feel like
kind of
Coker's so
shoes
singular.
to fill. Yeah.
It's tough, you know. But yeah, Fatal Cure, we'll hear one song from Sea Ignorance here. You know, timely lyrics again, brutal rhythmic riffing from Jay, and you get to kind of hear the new rhythm section and kind of see what you think about it. So yeah, so we got a pair of tunes from their 1996 record before they kind of went on hiatus in Mourning. We've got Destroyed by Society and Calculated Bloodshed. And then we've got from 2013, the Runes of I keep wanting to say Humanity, but the Runes of Humans. And then from 2016, Sea of Ignorance, we got Fatal Cure.
living close-minded, leaving behind the dead and the weak. Animal species becoming extinct. Mankind strives for knowledge, concrete towers to the skies. Civilizations build and destroy. Industry overconsumption, pain and sorrow for all the living. Pollution fills the atmosphere. Poison clouds, angry seas, coastal cities swallow. Continue to fight, eternal for survival, even though there is no time to save themselves. No politics or religion, no order, mass confusion. See through bloody eyes, food and water, rolling scarce. Vegetation dies, there is no light. The time to evolve, bringing self to extinction. Continue to fight, each other for survival, even though there is no time to save themselves. No politics or religion, no order, mass confusion.
That's Fatal Cure, Ruins of Humans, Calculated Bloodshed, Destroyed by Society, and once again we heard from Jay. So appreciate
Not the Elusive Cure, but the Fatal Cure.
Yeah. What did I say? Elusive Cure? Who did that?
Paradise Lost.
Oh yeah.
And anytime you say Ruins of anything, I just think of Ruins of Beverast.
Yeah. I was thinking for some reason when you said Elusive Cure, I thought it was like it reminded me like something like Gorguts would have done, like early stuff. But yeah, so we got 2 more to go out on here. We usually end with 1, but as I was putting the show together,
I didn't listen to the last one. I just listened to Tribute.
Yeah, well, that's fine. The last one kind of speaks for itself, but the last one literally was dropped last week. That's what's so fascinating about it. So like they literally just dropped a brand new song in 2022. And it's called Orchestrated Devastation, and it's going to, I'll kind of talk about that in a second. But first, as we sort of close things out with Tribute. Tribute, I think, for me is definitely my favorite song on Sea of Ignorance. It's, I'm a tremola whore, as people know. And so I love that kind of main tremola riff, and especially when Jay launches in like near about the 3-minute mark. It's just really like bluesy, tasty, sort of heartfelt sort of solo. I did say this is like impressive for Roost and Gross here. He does a lot of really cool Commando Pete kind of double bass kind of stuff throughout Tribute. That's pretty impressive. So Sea of Ignorance is not a record I'm probably going to return to a lot, but I do appreciate that they're fucking like 20 years later doing some pretty good death metal, for old guys.
Yeah, it's not reinventing the wheel, but very good 90s death metal.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's exactly what you sort of want. So yeah, so basically what is coming out, I think it drops in May. It's called Sempiternity. Sempiternity? Yeah, Sempiternity. And this tune we're going to sort of close out with following Tribute is the new song that just dropped, like I said, last week. There's kind of a video, you can find it floating around YouTube, called Orchestrated Devastation. And it's one of 2 new tracks that's coming out on this EP. You also have 2 re-recorded songs, Crushed and Artistic Butchery, which I believe are both from Screams of Anguish. I'm not.
I think so.
Yeah. And then 4 live tracks from the Maryland Death Fest in 2019.
Comes out May 27th.
There you go.
Just in time for Death Fest.
Emancipation Records from Denmark is putting out. So kind of interesting. And by this, they have a second guitar player. So Jarrett Pritchard, who I believe you said was the guy that produced from Eulogy. Yep. And then Ron Parner is on drums. So they got rid of Roost and Gross. I just said the song is inspiring. It's got tasteful, emotive leaves, lovely tremolas. It's just a nice. It's exactly what you would expect from Brutality, and that's what you want,
Yeah.
So, but yeah, we wanted to throw this together. We knew that again, this is not a band that gets like a lot of spotlight. It's really funny because I think we mentioned in the Chasm episode. I don't know if it was on mic or off mic. That our Spotify, every time like a Chasm like playlist ended, it would automatically jump to Brutality.
Yeah,
it's like a weird algorithm thing, and it was doing it on both our phones. So something was, the universe was aligning.
I'd go to Brutality and then Immolation,
and then sure enough, like I'm putting this together, and then I see like Decibel has like a thing like Brutality drops new song. I was like, well, this was meant to be, So Orchestrated Devastation, but. Again, patrons, we do always appreciate your support. Thank you. We hope you appreciate this episode. I know it's been a little while since we did the best of back in late January, I think. So it's been a couple months, but
everybody said, yeah, it's cool. We got throwing a lot of
Misfits and Dead Kennedys episodes were a lot to put together. I'll say that. It was a lot of moving parts
to edit. A lot to do.
So a lot going on. So the Edge of Sanity was a little simpler and kind of a return back to form. Chasm was tough because that was a band. It was tough to like kind of put all those pieces together because they're kind of new to Mark and I. But I think it was fun to kind of go back to some meat and potatoes stuff with Edge of Sanity and Brutality and just kind of get back to our roots a little bit. So
it was interesting to go back to stuff that we're comfortable and familiar with, but take this new approach to it as well.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, there's not a lot of scholarship on Brutality, and I don't know if there's like really like. When you crack open the egg, I don't think there's any like grand revelations like maybe you get with the Chasm where you're like, holy shit, there was more going on here than meets the eye. But I think this is a band that, like I said, was lost in the shuffle of 1993, 94, 95, American death metal. That was such like a kind of pivotal point. And I bet there were probably people who were less into the European thing who were like way into this.
Oh yeah,
you get what I'm saying?
This
Like,
is
I think
like
there were
if you
people
were
that
like
were
into Obituary, you were right on this.
Yeah, if you were like, if you never left the American metal scene and didn't go to the Europe stuff like you and Chris did,
Yeah.
this was probably fucking right up your alley.
Well, this
you know?
is one of my my final treatise of. I don't think it's.
Yeah,
not,
do you
it's
have
not,
any?
not,
Do
not
you have
like
any other coherent thoughts
really-
from your rantings there?
really huge revelations? But it was. The final thing was that I think Tampa was a weird mix of, like Obituary. There's a certain element of music to make you move, like to dance to even
It's like Southern boogie, Southern blues,
Florida's a southern state. Like Jay
swamp rock.
Yeah, Jay's talking about another interview that he plays in other types of bands too, like not just metal related stuff. So, I think it's about the movement of the crowd. I think that's Obituary is totally about.
Yeah, when you go to an Obituary show,
Holy
you're
shit!
just fucking bouncing.
It's nuts. It's not over. It's not like over intellectualizing anything. Usually, like
I mean,
more.
they have a song called Redneck Stomp that's
Yeah.
fucking fun. Yeah,
It's just they have like that pop sensibility. If you makes you like want something catchy, something to make you move. It's more like physical than intellectual. Mm-hmm. And with and I think then you've got I think the different camps of the more Obituary bands that are more. It's about the experience. It's not really about great lyrics or
musicianship. Really, even like it's more stripped down. At some level.
They're tight as shit.
Yeah.
And they're catchy, but it's not like they're not technical.
It's not flashy.
Wizards. It's not flashy at all. But then you've got the side of like morbid monstrosity, brutality, death. Like they're kind of back and forth of what Tampa
depending on
is.
what era you're looking
Yeah.
at too.
But I think all of them have that kind of like make you move kind of undulation bounce thing happening more than really any other area that I can think of. That's
Yeah.
like a uniquely kind of Florida thing.
Yeah, it's almost like you can draw some like allusions to like the like dirty South hip hop that like Outkast and all those bands from like Georgia. It moves differently than like say New York or LA hip hop does because it's like got this like ingrained sort of Southern, the same things that we were inspiring like Allman Brothers. We're like inspiring like that stuff because it's just different, right? You know, just when blues from Mississippi it's ingrained in that music, right?
Yeah.
And stuff. And so when you come from like the deep South like that, it can kind of like be in the DNA a little bit differently. And I think it's less mechanical and cold. You listen to like some of the New York death metal bands, and that's more like
it's rhythmic, but not in that way that makes you want to jump around as much. It's more like stomp around and beat stuff, not like bouncing
but it's
group
also
of
like
people.
atmospheric and like chaotic and like empty. Like Immolation and Incantation are like gateways to hell.
Yeah.
More than like bouncing. I mean, you can still bounce, but
You can.
but it's just different.
But it's more of like a weird like
circle pit
circle pit kind of thing. But the bounce, like you can sit there and just hold your hand up and bounce up and down through any Obituary show.
Yeah, Cannibal sometimes, even though they're a New York band, they maybe tapped into a little bit like the Bleeding, like they had some rhythmic bounce.
They get Hammer Smash Face with the
Scott Burns is like
harmonic thing,
playing probably a role in that a little too because he was kind of the king of.
That was only certain songs.
Yeah, that's true.
Then it's like
a lot of it's just like chaotic and
bash your face in kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so hopefully, again, like this is originally intended for the patrons, but down the road, if this is the general listeners, if you want to become a patron for non-patrons who do encounter this, just go, you get really neat, fun, laid-back episodes like this if you become a patron. So you can go to patreon.com/Requiem Podcast or go to Requiem Podcast or RequiemMetal.com and click on Patreon. So I don't think I have to say any of the other goodbyes and stuff like that because our patrons already know where to find us and stuff. But it's been fun. We don't usually get to do 2 episodes, and we did it all before like an unreasonable time.
We did it pretty concisely, Tom.
Yeah, that was pretty good. So I'm pretty proud of us, Mark. So we've got
both got to get up early tomorrow. So
yes, both of us. Yeah, I got to teach tomorrow. Mark's got a dentist appointment. You said
I got a doctor's appointment. I got to get up at 6:30.
That's brutal. That's the real orchestrated
brutality.
devastation.
I'll do
That's
some
a
bounce in
real
there.
fucking brutality. Yeah. So we've got from Sea of Ignorance Tribute from 2016, and then the more recent drop, if you have not encountered it, from Sempiternity. I believe I'm saying that right. Orchestrated Devastation. So for Brutality, I'm Jason.
I'm Mark.